Link TV presents Mosaic World News from the Middle East. Here are today's top stories.
United Kingdom expels Iranian diplomats over embassy storming. Turkey slaps economic sanctions on Syria as Assad's forces storm Daesh. And angry protesters condemn Biden's visit to Iraq and demand an end to U.S. meddling. Mosaic. World news from the Middle East begins now.
British Foreign Minister William Hague said his country requested that the Iranian charge d'affaires in London and the entire Iranian embassy staff leave the UK. Hague said in a statement at the British Parliament that the ministry has recalled its entire staff from Tehran. He said that Tehran should not expect its relationship with Britain to continue on the same level after the attack on the British embassy in Tehran.
Broad international condemnation is reminding Iran of its responsibility to protect the diplomatic delegations on its soil after protesters stormed the British embassy in Tehran. U.S. President Barack Obama expressed his deep concerns, saying such behavior was unacceptable. He called on the Iranian government to hold those responsible accountable for their actions.
They have a responsibility to protect diplomatic.
They have a responsibility to protect diplomatic outposts. That is a basic international obligation that all countries need to observe. And for rioters, essentially, to be able to overrun the embassy and set it on fire is an indication that the Iranian government is not taking its international obligations seriously. So obviously, we are deeply concerned about that situation.
According to this month's UN Security Council President, Portuguese UN Ambassador José Felipe Cabral, members of the UN Security Council denounced what happened in Tehran.
The members of the Security Council condemned in the strongest terms the attacks against the United Kingdom's embassy in Tehran, Iran, which resulted in intrusions into the diplomatic and consulate premises, causing serious damage.
France also condemned the incident, as did Germany through its foreign minister Guido Westerwelle.
We strongly condemn the unlawful and unacceptable incidents in Iran. We condemn this violation of international law. As Europeans, we stand in solidarity with the United Kingdom, and we reaffirm Iran's responsibility to protect international facilities.
The British position was firm. After the British government convened a crisis meeting, Foreign Minister William Hague said he spoke with the Iranian Foreign Minister and warned him of the dangerous implications of his government's failure to protect the British embassy.
Clear to the Iranian government.
We have made clear to the Iranian government that they must take immediate steps to ensure the safety of UK personnel, to ensure that property taken from the embassy compounds is returned, and to secure the compound with immediate effect. Clearly, there will be other, further, and serious consequences.
In turn, the Iranian Foreign Ministry said it regrets this unacceptable behavior of a small group of protesters. It added that it requested that relevant authorities take necessary measures and immediately investigate the incident. Protesters threw petrol bombs and burned the British flag after they stormed the embassy in protest of the UK's new economic sanctions on Iran.
Assad's brigades have stepped up their military campaign across various Syrian regions. Today, Assad's brigades killed 17 people and stormed the city of Daesh in Daraa using tanks. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said that 7 Syrian troops were killed in Daesh during clashes with army defectors. Meanwhile, the opposition's supporters marked the Wednesday of United Syria is our homeland.
This is how Syrian President Bashar al-Assad and his regime are fulfilling their promise of reforms. Today they opened fire at protesters demanding freedom and democracy. Under the slogan, Wednesday of United Syria is our homeland, the opposition's supporters took to the streets in massive demonstrations in most Syrian cities and towns. The opposition announced a general strike on Thursday to mourn the victims who are being killed by the gunfire of Assad's brigades on a daily basis. In Idlib, media websites released video clips showing a group of protesters demonstrating and chanting anti-regime slogans in front of Assad's brigades and security forces. In Latakia, Assad's brigades attacked demonstrators chanting slogans demanding the downfall of the regime and Assad's departure. Amid these developments, the regime stepped up its military operations across various Syrian regions. Syrian tanks and Shabiha stormed the area of Da'il in Daraa amid heavy gunfire and explosions, and as planes flew over the area. Incoming reports confirmed that all communication networks and electricity have been cut off in Daraa. News reports also confirmed that the villages of Suran and Hilfaya in the countryside of Hama have also been stormed. Security and Shabiha buses, backed by tanks and armored vehicles, were seen heading to the village of Asal al-Ward in the countryside of Damascus. Meanwhile, the residents expressed fear that their village may come under a fierce attack and retaliation for taking part in a demonstration held in solidarity with the hard-hit town of Rankus, which has been witnessing a campaign of random sweeps and arrests. Activists confirmed that the regime has cut off communication to the town of Talkalakh and Homs as tanks are deployed on its outskirts. The opposition supporters took to the streets at night in massive anti-regime demonstrations as part of the Tuesday of Protection and Loyalty to Nurses and Doctors, in which dozens of people were killed by the gunfire of Assad's brigades.
Turkey announced the suspension of its strategic cooperation with Syria and revealed a series of economic and trade sanctions. In turn, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation's final statement called on Syria to cease using force against civilians and to respond to the Arab League's resolutions. The statement noted that the failure to resolve the crisis within Arab and Islamic nations will push the issue toward other parties. In addition, the Spanish Foreign Ministry called on its citizens to leave Syria immediately.
It seems as though Turkish-Syrian relations have reached the point of no return after weeks of repression that the Syrian regime has been carrying out against anti-government protesters. This was confirmed by Turkish Foreign Minister Ahmet Davutoglu's announcement to cut off economic ties with Syria until a legitimate rule is established in Damascus. At a press conference, he unveiled a series of sanctions on Damascus that Ankara approved, and he affirmed that the sanctions target the regime, not the people.
We announced the freezing of assets of any internationally wanted Syrian official and businessmen cooperating with the regime, ceasing to sell any kind of weapons to Syria, prohibiting any airline supplying weapons to Syria from Turkish airspace, freezing all Turkish economic activities in Syria, suspending all cooperation with the Syrian Central Bank, and halting various guarantee agreements for Turkish projects in Syria.
Davutoglu believes that Syria has entered a crisis that it cannot escape, and that the Syrian regime has lost its legitimacy. He then criticized Damascus, saying it has missed its last chance and did not respond to the Arab plan. The Turkish minister indicated that the threat of a civil war in the region is beginning to loom due to the Syrian issue. In response to the Turkish decision, Syrian security forces closed down its border crossing with Turkey in Al-Kamishli. Meanwhile, the Organization of the Islamic Conference urged Syria to provide protection for the diplomatic delegations, reiterating that the continuation of violence in Syria is unacceptable. The organization's Secretary-General Ekmeleddin Ihsanoglu said we were keen to pursue a peaceful diplomatic solution with Syria without interfering in its affairs, and we proposed a number of initiatives to the Syrian leadership in order to resolve the crisis. In a meeting of the organization in Jeddah, attended by the Syrian Foreign Minister Walid al-Muallim, Ihsanoglu said, "We have made it clear that the security and military approach against the civilians is unacceptable."
Hundreds of Iraqis have taken to the streets to protest the visit by U.S. Vice President Joe Biden. The demonstrators demanded the withdrawal of American troops from Iraq by the December deadline.
Our stance against the occupation is constant. We don't want any American soldier in our country, neither for training nor for other issues. The US troops will leave within a month, but there is something going on behind the scene which the Iraqi people do not know about. Some kind of an agreement between Biden and the Iraqi government. We warn everyone against any agreement that harms Iraq's security.
The rallies were held in the capital Baghdad as well as the cities of Basra and Najaf. Biden arrived in Iraq on Tuesday to visit the country's leaders as well as American troops there. Both Baghdad and Washington have failed to come up to an agreement on keeping some U.S. military presence in Iraq next year. This means all American forces must be out of the country by the end of 2011. Some 4,500 American troops have died in Iraq since the U.S. invasion of the country back in 2003. Pakistan says the United States should vacate its strategic air base in the country by December the 11th. The Pakistani Prime Minister, Yusuf Raza Gilani, says Islamabad has sent a formal letter to Washington calling for the evacuation of the Shamsi air base in Balochistan province. This after NATO fighter jets and helicopters bombed two army posts near the Afghan border, in which it resulted in the death of 24 Pakistani soldiers on Saturday. In another move, Islamabad closed supply lines for the U.S.-led NATO troops in Afghanistan. Now, Pakistani officials say they've decided to boycott next week's Bonn conference on the future of Afghanistan in protest at the attack. Pakistan has been the scene of anti-U.S. demonstrations since Saturday. In Yemen, the regime forces have killed one more protesters and they've injured several others in the southern city of Taiz. Activists say security forces have been firing shells since Tuesday, forcing thousands of people to flee the city. Taiz is Yemen's second largest city and a hotbed of the opposition to embattled ruler Ali Abdullah Saleh. The latest violence comes as people once again have taken to the streets to denounce the regime's brutal crackdown. A mass rally has also been held in the city of Ib. The protesters oppose a recent power transfer deal that Saleh signed in Saudi Arabia. The deal gives Saleh and his family immunity from prosecution. Yemeni protesters demand that Saleh be tried on charges ranging from corruption to the deadly crackdown on protests. Mass protests continue in Morocco. Protesters are denouncing Friday's general elections that brought to power the head of the Justice and Development Party. Protesters chanted slogans condemning the elections and the results. They said the polls were a complete farce. Results show that PJD has won 107 seats in the 395-seat parliaments. Unlike the banned opposition group Justice and Charity, the PJD pledges its allegiance to the ruling monarchy. Lebanon says it has paid its share of funds for a special tribunal investigating the 2005 assassination of former Premier Rafik Hariri. Prime Minister Najib Mikati says the decision was made in order to protect Lebanon. He says the payment of more than $30 million dues for the Netherlands-based court was made on Wednesday. Earlier, he had threatened to step down if his cabinet refused to agree to fund the tribunal. This comes after the West warned that the UN could impose sanctions on Lebanon if it fails to fund the tribunal. The U.S.-backed court was tasked with investigation into the bomb explosion which killed Hariri in Beirut.
تتواصل عملية فرز أصوات المرحلة الأولى للانتخابات التشريعية التي
Ballot counting for the first round of votes in the legislative elections, which were held under judicial monitoring, is underway in Egypt. The High Elections Commission said the results of single-seat constituents and the names of the winners who qualify for runoff elections will be announced tomorrow night. The commission will also announce the number of votes won by each partisan list and the names of winners qualifying for the third phase of elections in January. In another related development, 75% of the first-round votes have been counted in Alexandria, amid indications that the Muslim Brotherhood is in the lead.
أصيب نحو 80 شخصا في هجوم للبلطجية على
Nearly 80 people were injured during attack by thugs on protesters staging sit-ins for the 11th day at Cairo's Tahrir Square. Witnesses said the attackers used petrol bombs, rocks, empty bottles, and gunfire. Activists from the April 6th movement said the attack was launched by organized gangs trying to lure protesters outside of the square. Meanwhile, activists in the square accused the Interior Ministry of being behind the attack.
ميدان وزارة الداخلية بالوقوف وراءه.
تتسابق الأحداث وتتسارع في ميدان التحرير وسط العاصمة المصرية.
Tahrir Square, at the heart of the Egyptian capital Cairo, continues to make headlines.
الرئيس السابق حسني مبارك ها هي الساحة نفسها تستجمع قواها وتعزم على إنهاء.
Tahrir Square, which not long ago ousted former President Hosni Mubarak, is once again mobilizing to end the military rule and transfer power to a civilian authority.
الذي شهد هدوءا نسبيا خلال يومي الانتخابات الماضيين تعرض المعتصمون.
After 2 weeks of sit-ins at the square and a relative calm in the past 2 days of voting, street vendors and thugs launched a surprise attack on peaceful protesters last night.
تصدوا للمهاجمين الذين استخدموا في الموجة الأولى العصية والحجارة ليتطور.
The strikers confronted the attackers, who used sticks, rocks, guns, and knives. Medical sources confirmed that dozens of protesters were injured, including some with serious injuries.
بجروح بينها حالات إصابة عنيفة.
Most injuries were caused by street vendors outside the square. They used rocks, heavy sticks, and bottles in the clashes. We treated nearly 60 injury cases.
مرة أخرى تحول ميدان التحرير إلى ساحة معركة يدور فيها القتال هذه المرة بين شباب.
Tahrir Square once again turned into a battlefield between rival youths, who were once united under the same slogans.
والحجارة والزجاجات الفارغة ثم إطلاق.
According to activists from the April 6th movement, the attack was launched by organized gangs who opened fire and hurled petrol bombs, rocks, and empty bottles at the protesters in a bid to lure them outside the square. Meanwhile, activists in the square blamed the Interior Ministry for the attack and accused it of diligently seeking to quell the sit-in movement and clear the square, which began pulling the seat from under the military council amid calls for its departure. In Somalia, there have been signs of a security breakdown in the past several days, as explosions repeatedly targeted civilians and government facilities. Shabab al-Mujahideen movement claimed responsibility for the bombing that took place today in the Somali capital, targeting the Army's command center headquarters and the Somali Armed Forces operations chief. The bombing killed a number of guards and wounded several others. Fakhdi Yassin reports.
The blast that shook Mogadishu targeted the Somali Armed Forces operations chief. A number of guards at the Army's command center were killed, and several others were wounded. Some are in critical condition. Shabab al-Mujahideen claimed responsibility for the attack and vowed to launch more attacks on the African Union's troops and Somali government forces. Army leaders rushed to the attack site to inspect the damage and begin an investigation. The operation commander, who was the target of the attack, confirmed he was not injured in the explosion that took place near him.
What happened was meant to happen, naturally, as there is no truce between us and the attackers. There is war, and this war will continue, and we will teach them a lesson. We will not stop the battle until we achieve our goals.
The Somali capital witnessed a security breakdown. 15 explosions targeting government and civilian buildings were recorded in less than a week. Over 20 civilians were killed or wounded in the bombings.
I was working at the market when I heard that 3 of my children and my sister were wounded in a landmine blast. One of my sister's children is dead. This is our fate.
In a meeting with the African Union forces, the Somali army, the Somali police and intelligence chiefs, and the Somali government vowed to put an end to the security breakdown in the capital. Civilians were not the only victims of the security breakdown in Mogadishu. The government was also affected. It appears that the Shabab movement, which officially withdrew from the capital, is determined to stay in the city on its own terms. Fakhdi Yassin, Al Jazeera, Mogadishu.
open right here in Jerusalem, where Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's Forum of Eight today approved the transfer of $100 million in tax money to the Palestinian Authority. The decision follows heavy diplomatic pressure on Israel and came despite powerful opposition from Foreign Minister Avigdor Lieberman. More now from IBA's Dennis Zinn.
The fact that the inner cabinet today authorized the resumption of cash flow to the Palestinian Authority came as no surprise to anyone. Over the last few days, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Defense Minister Ehud Barak were overtly lobbying other ministers and trying to sway public opinion to support the initiative. Israel collects some $100 million a month in tolls and duty for the PA, which was transferred regularly to banks in Ramallah. Payments were halted over a month ago, following Abbas's unilateral initiative at the UN to receive recognition as a sovereign state. Today, the entire Forum of Eight, besides Foreign Minister Avigdor Lieberman, voted in favor. It now remains to be seen how the leader of Israel Beiteinu will react following his reported threat to bolt the coalition if the funds are transferred. Lieberman believes that bolstering the Palestinian economy at this point is not responsible and threatens Israel's security. He said that it simply rewards PA leader Mahmoud Abbas for his unrelenting drive to declare a Palestinian state at the UN and signals to the world that Israel does not really care. Netanyahu today responded by saying that the Palestinians have stopped their unilateral moves and that Israel is interested in making sure that the Palestinian Authority remains in power. Echoing Netanyahu's words, Defense Minister Ehud Barak said it's important to help maintain the stability of the PA in general and the Palestinian security forces in particular. Neither leader mentioned the intense pressure they have felt in recent weeks to release the funds from the international community, including from allies of Israel.
This is a lever that Israel has used consistently over the last 10 years. This isn't the first time they've stopped it. It's not the first time that they turned it back on. And I think what you saw Netanyahu say today is indeed what's going to be the policies. They're going to keep this thing as a club in the background that they feel that they could hit the Palestinians with any time that the Palestinians do something that Israel feels is going beyond the red line.
Coincidentally, the first strawberry exports from the Gaza Strip this season made their way on 2 trucks to the Kerem Shalom border crossing. Israel began easing trade restrictions on Gaza in November last year, again answering Western demands against an embargo it imposed on the Strip when Hamas seized power in 2007. Israeli officials today said they expect Kerem Shalom's capacity to increase to 400 trucks a day in the future, if security arrangements are resolved. Dennis Zinn, IBA News.
On the International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people, marches were launched from the Gaza Strip toward the buffer zones along the Gaza border and the United Nations headquarters.
In 1977, the United Nations called for the annual observance of the International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people on November 29th, most likely an admission of the injustice against this people after raping their land and displacing them with the Israeli occupation in 1948. This day forces the entire international community to face its responsibility of standing against Israeli policies that Palestinians continue to endure, even on the Day of Solidarity with them. They marched toward land seized by Israel, which prevented owners from reaching their property on the border with the Gaza Strip.
On November 29th, the International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people, we rise up today in Gaza to reject the Israeli occupation. We confirm our resistance will continue. Today we represent the popular resistance and we will not stay quiet.
And while this day was initially recognized by the United Nations for non-Palestinians around the world to advocate for the Palestinian cause, international solidarity activists prefer to come to the Palestinian territories to effectively participate in combating Israeli policies, even if it jeopardizes their lives, like it did for Rachel Corrie several years ago. She's the solidarity activist that was run over by Israeli bulldozers as she tried to prevent the destruction of Palestinian homes.
We are here with the Palestinian people for only one reason, the occupation. Can you see the separation wall? When you see something like this, you think it comes from the dark ages of our history. I want to tell the entire world that the occupation must end.
And since the United Nations adopted this day, it's not surprising that marches in Gaza are heading towards the organization's headquarters to demand the UN push Israel to implement its resolutions and end the suffering of a people who still endure the ravages of occupation.
We in the Appeal for International Solidarity with the Palestinian people launched a call today so our voice can reach the United Nations, so our voice can reach the free people of the world and Arab and Palestinian communities abroad. We are in favor of forming a Palestinian lobby that supports the Palestinian cause. 75% of the world population supports the Palestinian right to form a state. We need them to grow and form one bloc that can stand against American arrogance and the Israeli occupation.
As Israel continues its attempts to uproot and displace the Palestinian people, as it has done for over 63 years, the Palestinians are trying to draw the world's attention to their issues and concerns that have been expressed to all members of the international community, but have been ignored. Sami Khalifa, Palestine TV, the Gaza Strip.
The views expressed on Mosaic are from contributing broadcasters, not Link TV or its sponsors. The production of Mosaic is made possible by grants from the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, the Wyncote Foundation, the Firedoll Foundation, and by support of viewers like you. Thank you. Watch Mosaic World News online. Stay up to date with breaking news, read our blog, get transcripts of past shows, and more at linktv.org/mosaic. Now on U.S. airwaves, a global channel of uncompromising stories. World news, documentaries, entertainment, and culture. Link TV, connecting you to the world. For more information, visit linktv.org.